Wonderful. Minutes outlined on pages 5 to 10. Does anyone have any accuracy or comments on the accuracy of the minutes?
No.
Wonderful. I shall sign those. Urgent items. I've not agreed to the consideration of any urgent items. Declaration of interest. Does anyone want to declare that they are interesting?
James.
Councillor Redsill.
I need to say that Blackshots is going to be mentioned, and as I'm the ward councillor for Blackshots, just wearing on the side of, you know.
Councillor Pearce.
Just got, I've got interest, Teviot Flats in Aveley and the Aveley site.
Ms Hodgson. Wonderful. Right, so we'll dive straight into the excuse me, the Housing Ombudsman's report. Evelina, are you kicking off, or are we going to go? How would you like to do it? Yeah, Evelina, please.
Thank you so much, Chair. I hope that's okay. So we have got obviously a topic of great importance to us today, and it is really our by now regular update to you members of the committee about how we deal with damp and mould repairs and the sort of processes we follow. We have got today joining us our main contractor who undertakes damp and mould repairs for us, Mears, and we've got Gary Lascombe here with us today. So any sort of very practical questions that might arise from a discussion, we're sort of prepared to take them. We have also set ourselves ready should you wish to see any of the stats, any of the performance, any of the sort of how we monitor, and we've got dashboards ready to show on the screen should you find that useful. And I will now hand over to Shahid to introduce the report. Thank you.
Good evening, Committee. Good evening, Chair. It's been 2 years since the Ombudsman released their Spotlight Damp and Mould report in October 2021, and this is now just a regular update on some of the progress we've made against the 26 recommendations that were published by the Ombudsman. The report contains details of how we've adopted all 26 of those recommendations and how we've implemented a programme to treat damp and mould within our properties. In essence, we want to build stronger relationships and partnership with our residents, so when they do contact the council, they can be treated respectfully and they know they will get the works treated in their properties as adequately and in a timely fashion, but also supported with information, guidance and other materials to help the management of damp and mould within the properties. Of course, we have our responsibilities to repair where it's identified, and we fulfil those obligations in the best way we can. The report identifies a number of additional measures that we're happy to discuss once you're happy to take questions, a number of innovative approaches and techniques that we're rolling out with our partnering contractors that we'll be happy to showcase to the committee and identify and visit some of the properties whereby we'll be implementing new approaches to tackling and treating damp and mould. So I'm happy to leave it there and take questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shahid. Who wants to? Councillor Yard.
As you probably know, Tilbury's got some of the oldest properties in the borough. Do you have sort of hotspots in terms of damp and mould, or I'm imagining, because I get so many sort of inquiries about damp and mould, that it's sort of all around Tilbury, but I'm sure it's not.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So, I mean, we do have hotspots in certain locations and archetypes, but obviously in some streets you'll get a number of the same properties built that will suffer from damp and mould where others won't. So it's about how individuals can manage that and ventilate and air circulate and also heat their properties. So it's not necessarily a hotspot for specifics. We do get them in specific types of property. You can take a flat, for example, low-rise flat. If the heating is not used and the air circulation is not there, then you will get spots, cold spots towards the wall. So in say, for instance, Tilbury, Ockenden, we do have hotspot areas from repair data that we analyse and we can pick up on. But there's a number of factors there that contribute. It's not like every property in that block there's a lot of other factors that can contribute, and that's how we try to raise communication and awareness. So if we can engage with obviously local residents and bring that understanding of how we can manage that, then it is part of the solution to not only repairs, to manage it long term.
How do you actually identify damp? Do you have meters that go into the wall?
Yes, we do. We've actually, within our team there, we use actually a number of meters. So the surveyors, obviously, the current one we use is a Bosch PTD1. It's a thermal detector, so it doesn't just detect damp. It tells you the humidity within the property. We obviously conduct a survey initially, the workforce, so the workforce will have the ability to also use them products. For your things like, which is known as cold spotting, small marks around the windows, usually related to condensation, a three-stage treatment would be applied. Anything that would be more complex in various locations within the property, we would use the meters, take the readings, and obviously over and above that, from the supervisor, we'd tie in with Thurrock Council surveying team and share with what we've identified for approval.
Shahid, on page, I think it's page 10 of the damp and mould strategy, it's page 34 of the agenda pack, the section about temporary accommodation, I understand from housing colleagues from Southend that one of the problems they have is temporary accommodation tends to attract more damp and mould issues because the turnover of residents is so regular. There tend to be fewer people who are fixed for a period of time to constantly tell the council, remind the council that there's a problem. When you go about, because you mentioned in the body of the report about proactive, preventative work, how do you balance that? Do you take more of a focus on the temporary accommodation because there aren't likely to be residents there who are there long enough to point out some of these problems for you?
We want to take a balanced approach. Irrespective of whether there's a turnaround of residents in a property, we still have responsibility. We still have landlord obligations to make sure the property is treated right and we fulfil our responsibilities. We're working much more closely with our temporary accommodation colleagues to identify this, gather the data, and use the opportunities when there's a break in tenancy. So when we do have a turnaround, we have the property as a void. That's the time when we want to make sure that we use historic data if we do find out there's been damp and mould there, is treat the relevant areas, put in necessary protective measures if possible, and then perhaps provide the information with the new incoming tenants. Irrespective of the length of tenancy they have there, we still want to make sure they live as comfortably as they can whilst they're waiting to be permanently rehoused. So we try to take a balanced approach, but we're working with our colleagues, use the data available to us to identify those properties, but use the opportunity when they're void, as well as when they're in situ, of course, to try to carry out the necessary repairs.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Edsel.
Thanks, Chair. I don't want to labour black shots because we're already in process of that, and I think taking a little bit of a stick up for the council, it's something you've inherited, so we're doing it. My only worry with this is how we've obviously vacated 11 or 12 properties already and they are standing empty now. Is there any we're asking obviously residents now to have another winter in there, which we've got a few young children, young babies in there. I don't want to lose a baby or a young child, so I think we need to look at that, but we also need to look at if these properties are empty, do we still go out and have a look at the empty properties just to make sure that nothing is untoward in there, because these are going to be empty for quite a while now.
Sheed, please.
Chair, thank you. We still, as I mentioned, still have landlord responsibilities to the entire block, irrespective if there's one empty flat or a number of empty flats, particularly as Gary has mentioned, the incidence of cold spotting, so you get cold air traps that can lead to the prevalence of damp and mould. We will still visit those properties, yes, because we still have responsibility to all those residents and the families in those blocks.
Yeah, Councillor Edsel.
Just labour that a little bit more. I mean, we have had a ceiling fall in, and that's what I didn't want to happen. I don't want other things to happen in those blocks, you know, that could infringe on. Perhaps someone's got someone empty up above and someone's empty down below, and they're the middle flat, and all the damp and mould's going to build up in those empty ones now.
Shall we, Evelina, then Gary?
Thank you. We're very keen tonight. So it's 14 void flats at this moment in time, 14 families. I know, it's a growing number because obviously it's all happening every day. That's good news. So I think just overall, when we have got a strategy how to deal with the block as it becomes more empty and empty, and each time there is a family moving out, we do disconnect most of the services. We decommission, which is probably Gary's point. We decommission, we sort of secure everything that we can. We empty the flat as well. So when it will reach a certain sort of proportion of empty flats, we will then apply a sort of another stage of how we will deal with then half empty or more empty building. So gradually we will be employing other things and other processes to monitor the sort of the building and the people that would still live there.
Gary, did you want to bounce in?
I was just going to say about the decommissioning and what we do. We disconnect all supplies and we cut off the stack so there's no potential leak for the flood from the empty flat, and the water supplies are shut down and kept off. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll go to Councillor Spate and then Councillor Shinnick.
Yeah, I had a question, but I'm just a little bit interested about what you just discussed. So can you just explain how many empty properties we've now got within Blackshots then?
14.
Right. Given the situation and the crisis point we're at in terms of temporary accommodation across the borough, and I'm moving slightly away from the subject matter, but we're closing these down for a reason. But it just seems to me that, we deal with requests for temporary accommodation, we deal with requests from families who are in a desperate state. There is no guarantee, no one in this room can guarantee that we're going to knock Blackshots flats down. I know it's the plan, but there is no guarantee that it's going to happen. And the way everything else in the borough has been reversed, it wouldn't surprise me if it doesn't happen. Are we sure that closing these properties down, these flats down, is a good thing? Sorry.
Thank you, Chair, if I may. There was a cabinet decision to that effect in early in this year, and we put out a sort of risk-based approach and case whereby we sort of persuaded the cabinet that it is for really the good of the residents and the safety of the block to actually leave those properties empty. We weigh the impact on homelessness, on approaches, and the impact on the bidding cycles and waiting lists as well, because obviously we have got a number of families going with the highest priority to the register, and it was still a most beneficial approach to leave those properties empty. When we go on to talk about Keith's report, no doubt the sort of the financials will probably come up at some point, although this is just an update report. But our first and foremost aim is to vacate the blocks, and we're really working hard to achieve that.
Councillor Spate, I know you had another question as well, so feel free to carry on.
Yeah, sure. To get back onto damp and mould. In 2021-22, you had 1,283 damp and mould repairs. In the last accountable year, we had 2,136, which is an increase of round about 8,500, I believe, maybe 900. Do you have any indication, I mean, we're 6 months into the next year, of how we sit on a year-on-year comparative this year?
Look how excited Mr. Seaman is with his data bank. You made an officer very happy, Councillor Spate.
So the increase year on year between 2021-22 and 2022-23, that increase was around 880. And in 2022-23, we implemented a set of questions in our tenant satisfaction surveys which aim to proactively detect damp and mould, unreported damp and mould that hadn't been reported to us. And during that year, around, I believe the number's 844 repairs were raised using those methods, so that by far and away accounts for most of that increase in repair demand. Is proactively detected damp and mould repairs, as well as pilot survey repairs, which were basically put in place by using the data that we're producing and understanding where those damp and mould repairs are required. So in terms of your second question and where we are year on year at the moment, I've got that number on our dashboard here. So we have this year, so this financial year, we've issued, as of today, 604 works orders, and there's 582 individual properties that have been affected by damp and mould, and that accounts for 5.87% of our stock.
Councillor Spate.
So it's going to go down slightly, hopefully, which is, I suppose, is a good thing. What sort of? I mean, how many of those properties? Hopefully, the answer is none. Are repeat visits?
So I've got some data on repeat visits. So we set our baseline for this data from the 1st of January 2019. So we've got to draw that line in the sand somewhere to be able to kind of quantify how many repeat visits there have been at particular properties for damp and mould. So of 604 works orders issued so far this year, 228 are new reports and 376 have had damp and mould occurring at that property at some point since the 1st of January 2019. However, that doesn't mean that those repairs have occurred in the same location. We are working on looking at analysing the data to be able to determine that as we speak, but it's not quite finished yet. But we're able to determine that there have been 376 repeat reports this year where the property has had a damp and mould repair since the 1st of April 2019.
Councillor Spate.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, just one more thing. When we go in, and particularly when we're going back to a property, and let's not beat about it, but some of the buildings that we've got, by their own very nature, are not great. Some of the tenants, by their very nature, are also not great. Some of the problems, I think, will and I've been in some of these flats, and I've been in some of the worst ones, and there is always, in those instances, an element of, I think that I'll be generous and call it a lack of self-help from tenants who some of them, and I'll be honest, they're young people. They're not really trained to look after property these days in the way that maybe older generations were. What sort of, as well as fixing the property when we go back, what do we do then in terms of giving educational support to those householders so that they can help themselves and then help us by not having to go back? Because I think education is really important in this sphere.
Shade.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Spate. You've hit a very important point there in that, and I've expressed this a number of times, that we have to build that relationship with our residents so that they have the confidence they can talk to us and not only just report an issue, but be prepared to take on advice that we can offer and support. And we're trialling a different range of techniques. Just handing up leaflets just won't do it. We need to find other ways. Do we hold campaigns? So do we treat this like a public health issue and have roadshows or campaigns to highlight the issue and also to encourage our residents to come forward and discuss with us? We are rolling out an online training module within the authority, so for council officers, right across all departments, in terms of how to discuss damp and mould, how to approach residents, how to identify, and we welcome the committee's feedback to be part of that process as well, and so that we have a consistent approach from the authority and our partners, so including health colleagues and such like. Hopefully, towards the end of this year, we'll be looking to implement out an app which people can download on a phone and report the repairs using an app. and it will give them the facility also to upload pictures and videos on the app. So when they are reporting damp and mould, they can take a picture and report it to us. If they have difficulty discussing the matter, they can use the app to report it, and then we can then follow that query up. We want to also look at other techniques, how we can sort of discuss issues with our residents to give them maximum control over the situation, as you've highlighted, Councillor Spate. And one approach may be to perhaps to willing residents to take up a small treatment pack. So where we have been into a property, you mentioned the point about repeat incidences, where we know there could be a potential repeat because of the very nature of the structure of the property in the envelope, we leave a small treatment pack. And we will provide all the necessary PPE, guidance, online tutorials, information how to apply it safely. And this will be used to treat small areas of spots and where they may reoccur in the bathroom, in the kitchen, around windows, and give them those, if they've got the confidence to utilise it. So this is to give the maximum control back to the resident. Of course, if it becomes more pervasive, they can report it, and we will obviously visit and treat, as has been highlighted before. Gary, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just to jump in, what we like. So this is obviously what we're working to enhance the communication piece. But what we do currently is we do use very useful is Thurrock's damp and mould leaflet. Very easy, simplified. Tenants that seem to engage with it and understand. It's very picturesque as well around the subject. But we run them through with all of our guys are trained. They run through the leaflet. It's a laminated copy, talk through obviously ventilating, opening the windows, trickle vents, explaining that if they close these or cover them up, it will generate the problem, make it worse and more frequent, obviously likely to reoccur. A lot of people have the opinion that the three-stage treatment is just a slap over a bit of paint, it doesn't work. It's not 100% true, it does work, but the behaviour change once you apply that is really, really important. So all of our operatives, we've got dedicated in-house operatives and staff dedicated to this work stream. They've all recently undergone quite intense training on damp and mould. All their call handlers in the call centre within the last 2 months have all undergone a damp and mould run by MEAs. It's actually a practical exercise where you talk through questions as the tutor is the tenant. Very, very, very good training course. The staff loved it and it gave them such a better understanding. So when a tenant's calling, they're able to engage, talk more into detail, and if it gets to a point they can't, we have the dedicated team within the branch at the back office. We've seen great benefits from that. Also, things like video calls. Some tenants are willing to video call you on a WhatsApp call. It seems to be becoming more and more popular, which is predominantly the younger generation, or they're willing to email you through a picture on an email. That picture is so helpful. We can diagnose it and we can take it to the next level. That we can deploy the right people, give the right time allocation, go around and get a first time fix, and then just continue that. Some people say, can I have a copy of the laminated tee? Most people will take a picture of it and keep it on their phone. So we're seeing massive improvements with the communication piece, but it's always going to be evolving. We've always got to keep pushing forward. But the app's going to be, I believe, a big plus. So hopefully.
Thank you.
One more, Councillor Spate.
It's a very short. I think that's really great. It's fantastically positive. And I'm aware this is a sweeping generalisation, and it may offend some people who might be looking in, and for that I apologise. A lot of the people that are in the social housing where we have these problems are, and I use the term disadvantaged. They may be single-parent families, or they may be people who have suffered problems and are being rehoused for one reason or another. And so there is an extreme likelihood that a significant percentage of those tenants are going to be very actively involved with our social services teams. I think and I'm sure you probably have already thought of this because, I'm teaching my granny to suck eggs here, but I think some of that training that you've just talked about, if we could then look at some interdepartmental work, so some of those social workers or going in there, or even care workers, if they're looking after disabled people and things like that, if they could perhaps pick up on some of those skills, they're in there, they'll see things, and they could bring it back to you, or they could share that knowledge with the tenants. And I think, cross-departmental working is very much the way forward for this council to go. So I commend everything that you've said. I really appreciate. I think you're making great strides. It's brilliant. But just throw another idea in the pot, but it's probably already in there.
Thanks, Councillor. Sorry. Yep, Evelina.
Thank you, Chair. Just to respond to that, absolutely, you're spot on, Councillor Spate. So across, and it started probably 18 months ago, across the Adult Health and Housing Department, we have been doing exactly that. We call it integration, locality working, neighbourhood working, using a sort of theory of human learning systems. It's really all about person-centred approach, and to reduce the number of referrals or the times that the resident needs to speak to any professional. So we're trying to bring professionals together and essentially go together and work that way. It's also probably worth noting that this is something that we would absolutely want to roll out across the whole council, and I think this will feature very heavily in the people type of departments or services that are being provided, that we will try and integrate even more and to have the sort of more specific person-centred approach and really play to the strengths of the individuals that we meet and go by that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shinnick.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's just a general question. What is follow-up procedures once you've treated the damp and mould? You know, when you contact the residents, you go back to...
We do carry out via MERS post-inspections. So currently I think we're aiming for 100% to follow up on where we know there's been more pervasive reports of damp and mould. Then there will be follow-up from the surveyors, if not in the MERS team, but also within the council surveying team. And so go back every 2 to 3 months is something we want to also implement, resources permitting, of course. But also residents want us out their hair. They don't want us to keep coming back to check. So it's all fine, there's no problems. Why do you want to keep coming back? We want to keep coming back because it's about being proactive. But I think we do try to aim for 100% at the moment.
I think contractually it was always 10%, and obviously over the last 3 years in particular, we're pushed to sort of 50, 60, and then we're up to 100 now. What we will do, we'll always try and go back within the 2-3 month period. Sometimes tenants reporting spots around the window, so they call us beforehand, we talk through. They're already a little bit educated from the first time round, and we deal with it. But I think some of the things to maybe mention is we've done over the last 2 years, we've done pilots on archetypes within the borough, and the purpose of that was in the summer months, let's go and target the property before the cold snap of weather comes in. It's proved very useful for us as a pilot property. It's identified things that, you know, as we're doing the analysis and find it just supports the case, and obviously we've got a dashboard on that we can obviously strategically have a discussion around. But obviously the engagement part, I mean, all my supervisors now, I've got 7 now, they're all trained. 2 or 3 of them are borderline surveyors now. We're putting them through education, we're upskilling them. So, you know, it's working very, very close with Shahid and the team, making sure we're taking the right actions. And anything that's a property issue is fed back to Evelina Shahid and is put onto a programme or the right place if it's beyond the repair as such.
Just to follow up on that, Chair, thank you, is that we've identified, currently we're working in 6 void properties where we're applying a new approach, a treatment, to where we know there's damp and mould. It's had historic cases there, or reports rather, and we're trying a new treatment there so that when we re-let out back to residents, we ask them that we want to come back every 2 to 3 months just to check, to monitor, take readings, to see where there's any prevalence, provide the necessary support materials to the residents and possibly the sort of small treatment kits if they're confident enough to take that on. So it's about being proactive. There is also the issue that's highlighted previously about finding the silence of our residents. So we have the follow-up questionnaires. We're trying to encourage people to report, even where they're not reporting. That goes back to your point earlier, Chair, about if it's in temporary accommodation, people won't always report damp and mould. They may report a broken window, a broken door, but they may not necessarily report damp and mould because they know they're wanting to move on from the property. Whereas we will follow up with any repair request to say, do you have any damp and mould there? We're prepared to come out and treat that. So it's being proactive, finding the silence, and then giving the sort of assurance to our residents that we will treat that respectfully.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you. I know you're doing a good job with the damp and mould. I take it we're always regularly in trying to improve on this. And the other question is, how do we fare with other councils on damp and mould? Do we know? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Pearce. We do want to improve our service, hence some of the innovations we've highlighted about using different techniques, different approaches, providing support materials. Luckily, we have a partnering contractor who works across a number of boroughs across the south east and east of England. And I might invite Lucas, if you'd like to. How do we fare in other boroughs?
Yeah, great. No, it's a really good question. You can imagine that all across the UK with our local authority and housing association partners at the moment, we're facing the same challenge, and last winter was extremely challenging. So I think we've got a few responsibilities to the council here. And the first one is ensuring that we're responding really, really quickly. We've got the right resource to hit those 5-day and 14-day targets, which I think we're broadly doing a really good job of. And we've got resource now to make sure we're doing that. There's also a responsibility on us to make sure we're really auditable around what we're doing. So our IT systems, I know we talk about that quite a lot when you come to visits to our branch, but the sort of the audit log of all the contact we've had when we've attended, post-inspections, before and after photos, I think is really, really helpful as well. But you're right, we're always looking to improve, and I think there's opportunities to do things slightly differently over the course of this winter and beyond, and be a bit more. Well, I think the council themselves have been extremely proactive, because if you go back 2 years, we were already looking at data analytics, trying to identify high-risk properties and carrying out those sort of pilot visits as well. So I do think the council are, sort of leading the way in that regard, but we can't stand still. I think there's opportunities which we're trying to bring from some of our other relationships, being a bit more innovative, some of the products that Shahid mentioned, but also we're starting to look at thermal imaging as well of properties to start to link thermal performance of properties to risks around damp and mould, and that does allow you to start profiling your housing stock and take a really targeted approach to managing this issue, which won't go away. I think we are continually looking for better ways of managing this risk within your stock, definitely.
What about other councils? How do they fare to us? Do you know?
So we had it was interesting, a really wide range of responses to the challenge sort of this time last year, really, and going into the winter period. A number of clients were similar to yourselves, wanted to be really proactive, but there was a real range. So you've got landlords who wanted to get into every single one of their properties, inspect every single one of their properties, and you had others who were happy to sort of wait and allow the phone to ring when customers had a problem. I would say you took a sort of a sensible approach somewhere in the middle, were proactive on a risk-based approach, and it's not for me to say, but I think that's a sensible approach. But yeah, if you look at landlords across the UK, very, very different approaches to handling the challenge. And of course, you've got to balance the cost of that approach and the cost of that response as well. I think this winter we'll see a more measured approach from some of those who inspected every single one of their properties last year, for example.
Thank you.
Councillor Giard.
Thanks, Chair. Just wondering if there's any risk of litigation, and wondered if we'd lost any cases in court.
Thank you, Chair. I have included some data within the report in terms of the number of disrepair cases that have been brought against the council. Currently, I think at the time of writing the report, it was around mid-70s. It's currently in mid-80s, so it's increased. Yes, there's always a risk of litigation, particularly as we do have legal firms that do sort of offer their services quite in a proactive manner to our residents. We do challenge back quite robustly, and we can evidence, particularly as highlighted earlier, where we have visited properties. We have a full audit log, a full communication of where we've tried to access properties to treat the concerns. We're not always successful, particularly where residents are sometimes advised by their legal advisors not to allow us access to the property. This is where working more closely with our tenancy colleagues in terms of enforcing the obligations of the tenancy agreement to permit access so we can carry out our works. I've also included information in the report in terms of Ombudsman's findings. So over the last year, there were 5 cases reported to the Ombudsman regarding damp and mould, none of which was successful. 3 of which were unsuccessful, 1 which was not upheld because it wasn't within the jurisdiction of the Ombudsman, and 1 which is still a live case that the Ombudsman is still investigating. I think that's as much as I can report at the moment in terms of disrepair cases. It is an ongoing challenge, but I think our record is pretty robust.
To jump in, I'd probably say from my experience of multiple contracts and other authorities that I see is, although 80 sounds a high number, I've seen a lot more than that in other boroughs, like 120, 150s. And my personal opinion for the damp and mould approach, from what I see, a lot of what we do here is we're far more advanced than other clients, and they're taking ideas from what we're already applying. So I feel like, for me, I always want to be a step in front of everyone else and do the right thing. But it's nice to share them. The working groups that we've put together now, and we're part of with Thurrock, which I attend, is we're talking to all other parties, other service providers and other members, whoever's in that group, and we're learning from each other all the time. And there's always good ideas everywhere, and it's bringing them good ideas all together and working the right processes. But you're in a good place, in my opinion.
Chair, if I may just follow up on Councillor Pearce's query earlier. I've spoken to a number of similar landlords, sort of partnering landlords, if you like, neighbouring landlords, Peabody, Swan, who's part of Sanctuary, and Moat Housing, to share best practice, find out what are they doing as well to communicate with their residents and treatment. We are, what I can see, we have got measures in place, quite robust measures, which I've highlighted. And I think it's safe to say some of our neighbouring landlords are looking at some of the measures we are implementing. I guess I don't want to sort of say it too loudly, but...
Councillor Edson?
Gold stars will be coming soon. I think just with this report, which you said damp and mould in lots of areas, I think we did ask way back for a ward by ward. I don't think we got that. I'm not sure that that's ever come through, but it would be nice. I don't want to know about Blackshots, I already know about them, so I think we'll take that off the list. But I think if we've got damp and mould in our ward, it's always best to know where it is, and in what sort of categories of flats or houses it would come. I know it's a big job to do, but I think if we know that as ward members, at least we can help a little bit.
So we've got a suite of Power BI dashboards. We consume data on repairs relating to damp and mould, and we squeeze the life out of that data to produce intelligence from it. And what we've got at the moment is we've got a dashboard where we can just break that all down. We've got a dashboard where we can break it down by ward, town, property type, and a lot of different data points. So there's a lot of data to see, but it's already available for us. So.
Is it possible to send it out to us?
I can. Yeah, it'll be a lot of. Can I send that?
Yeah, send it
that's
by ward.
Absolutely, by ward. Yeah, I'll break that down. Yeah.
Yeah, cheers.
No comments. Councillor Spate?
Yeah, I may be off track here, and I'm sure Julian will tell me. Obviously, we're here primarily to talk about our own properties and that we've got. But as Julian knows, I spent some time today working with somebody who's actually moved in from another council to a property that's managed by a private landlord for another borough, whose presumably it would be their responsibility. But we do have a lot of HMOs in the borough. We have a lot of now a private rented accommodation at the lower end of the sector. I think it would be fair to say. Do we? I don't know whether it falls under the domain of housing, but do we have a responsibility also to keep a watching brief on properties? I'll say within the private sector, because a lot of those properties are going to have inherent problems that we used to have that we're now tackling, but one wonders whether those private landlords or those other councils are doing it. At the end of the day, a lot of those people in those properties are going to look to us as Thurrock Council to watch their backs. So, again, and that may involve, again, talking about sharing, because there may be other departments that deal with those people, sharing the knowledge and the progress that we've done, and then possibly even enforcement. But it just sort of struck my mind when that came up.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Tate. So we have got, it's another part of my service, private sector housing, and in particular the enforcement team of that area. They have got responsibility to react to complaints that come to the council and investigate those sort of complaints, and it's all around the state of the property. Damp and mould constitutes a hazard, and there are various sort of types of hazard. So it's sort of type 1 of hazard. We do have, and Chris has just brought this up for me. So category 1 and 2 hazards. So we keep stats on that obviously as well. So a damp and mould would fall under category 1. This particular stat is for category 1 and 2, so 2 is slightly obviously less. In the year, last year we have removed 1,302 of those hazards, and then we sort of, I think the target this year is 800, and we're sort of working through that. So there is actually a responsibility on the council to react to it, report, and then deal with the landlord to ensure that the landlord repairs. If the landlord does not want to do it just through agreement, we can serve improvement notice. If that improvement notice is not adhered to, we would then take that landlord to court and issue fines, and we have done that in the past as well. So,
right, in lieu of any other comments, the last comment I just wanted to make, pick up on something you mentioned earlier, Evelina, in response to Councillor Spate's question about cooperation between housing and social care team. I know that overwhelmingly our tenants are adults. I think we also have to consider children's services. We've got a growing population of care leavers who are in our housing stock, a growing population of young people living with long-term learning difficulties, and I think that it's quite right that we focus on that, on cooperation with adult social care, because that is the overwhelming bulk of the tenants. I get why we do that, but we shouldn't neglect what is, for a younger borough, increasingly growing a large population of our vulnerable young people in social housing. So is there anything you can say to that?
yes, no, absolutely. I mean, there is equally strong a relationship between us and Children's Services. Just the other month, there was a corporate parenting committee of which I'm a member of that board, and we have brought a report on the joint working protocol between housing and children social care. It is obviously all around the sort of housing of care leavers in particular, but this is just an example of how on the ground there is a really very strong sort of working relationship between those two services. And as you know, we look after Head Start housing now as well, which really gives us a very good insight to those particular care leavers that are not necessarily yet quite ready to just have their own tenancy, whether it's within our stock or whether it's somewhere renting privately. So we do provide that sort of support to them, and that's very closely linked with Children's Services. Also, I think the other thing around Children's Services, as you know, the family hubs that are there, that have been established sort of across the borough, housing is also visible and one of the partners to that provision of advice or support from within those hubs. So we're all sort of linked in through that as well. Thank you.
Very encouraging, thank you. Unless there are any other comments?
Just make one comment.
Yep, that's Red Cell.
Just, Evelina, are we as housing? Do you work with LAC as well? Local area? Do they come to you, or do you have to go to them?
We work together really, and this was the sort of integration model that we were looking to roll out. So in Corringham, we've been running that pilot quite successfully for quite a few months, where we literally have the teams all together in one place, and we're trying to reduce the referral process. We're trying to sort of cut down on that sort of red tape where that resident needs to sort of jump the hoop. So we work very, very closely together. I don't know if you ever go to the talking shops, obviously the one in Morrison's, for example, every Tuesday. Again, we go there, and you've got housing staff, and it's not just tenancy management, you've got other people from within housing as well. And obviously that's very much attended by LACs as well.
Thank you. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for me as colleagues for joining us this evening. So everyone happy to note recommendations 1.1 and 1.2?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. housing development programme. Evelina, again, did you want to kick off before handing over to Keith?
That's right. It is really good to have that update. I would note and stress this isn't an update on progress. We're not looking for any decision. This is just one of those regular updates that we provide to yourselves. Obviously, we're open to any questions that you might have. But other than that, I hand over to Keith.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. So, Evelyn, you've just taken my first paragraph that I was about to say, so I won't repeat that.
No, do repeat it.
But I will repeat it then. So, so what I will do, because we have been really keen to working with committee over time to ensure that we do give periodic updates where our development programme is and on certain sites as well as we go through. So what I will do, as we go through, I'll touch on a couple of relevant bits of the report and where there's been some areas of change since it's drafted, and there's just a couple of bits. I'll pick those up as I go through. So the first thing to say is, in terms of the whole programme, I've got a number in the report at 338. That's now dropped to 334. I don't know how that happened. I'll carry on. Of the number of properties in our development pipeline, and I'll explain why it's dropped 4 in a moment. And it's also fallen down from the last time we reported, really as a consequence of scheme amendments and some projects no longer progressing, which again are set out in the report. The bulk of the homes in the programme currently are the 2 big projects of stock renewal, being Blackshots and also at 7th Avenue. So they form the bulk of the programme at the moment. I mean, it does remain under review, obviously, because of the council's financial position, and any approvals, as we've said, to do anything to procure building contractors, has to be considered on a case-by-case basis. And we have the governance route of, this committee, cabinet, commissioners, and now business cases will be required to go to Her Majesty's Treasury. Because there's a restriction on authorities such as us that are operating under Section 114 notices. So that's that wasn't the case of the drafting, and now that's another step. So business cases are being produced, and we'll touch on those further as we go through. So I would just remind members that housing is slightly different in terms of its capital, the way the capital programme stacks up. So unlike other parts, many other parts, in terms of the capital investment, housing development does, of course, have an income stream to pay and support borrowing through the rental programme, and it does have use of the right to buy receipts that retain to the majority of those. So other areas of investment and development generally don't have that income stream, so it is slightly different. I'm going to draw your attention now to the chart down at 3.3 in the report. So just to say really that you'll see from that chart that the programme of properties by property size that we have in that programme, not perfectly, but matches reasonably well the demand from people, the targets that are derived from the numbers of people requiring housing on our housing register. So we've got a reasonable balance of what we're trying to develop against what the requirements are, which is, obviously makes sense. So on a positive note, and I said why we've dropped down 4 units from the proposed programme, is that we've had the 4 units completed in a project over at Lowen Road in Chapel St Mary. So they were completed in August, so they're completed ahead of schedule and on budget. So that's a bit of positive news, which is always good to report. As I mentioned, the major area of our investment and our programme relates to Blackshots and Sevier. So in terms of updating progress for these stock renewal redevelopment projects, it's worth being clear that their progress is subject to business cases. So I'm not here tonight to take you through those business cases. As you can imagine, we are working very hard to ensure that we are looking through the design works, we're looking through the resident engagement, and we will be testing, and then retesting all the financial viability that stacks up behind the case. And that will need to go through those governance processes, as I said, set out at the start, which now includes the Magistrate Treasury. We've set up a board member steering group. Councillor Riddle participates fully within those, as rightly is the case. And we've had a comprehensive programme over the summer of resident engagement. So that's both on site, actually, physical events, and also online as well. So that's run through 4 different events. The last one, I think, was 6th of September. The next one is on the 12th of October. And so that's the 4th of the 4. And so we've been talking about residents' issues, the estate in general, looking at proposed designs, and working through that programme. In terms of the overall programme, I'll just refer to 3.13. So where we are at the moment is to say we're working through the final design, working through the financial modelling for the business case, a pre-application, pre-planning submission has been submitted, trying to get my words out correctly. That's in, and so that will inform the design and the formal feedback from our planning colleagues. We're working towards the business case, and then the intention and plan is subject to all of that financial viability being tested, is coming to members early next year. So January 24 is our target. I'll move on to because we'll have plenty more reports in future about Blackjocks, maybe to take them as we go. Tevia, 36 flats. The report sets out that there are problems there that relate to the precast reinforced concrete condition of them. We've got a proposal we've been consulting on with the local residents to develop a mix of property types and build 48 new homes there. And I think our last resident engagement there was the 31st of August, I think. It was. All right, good, excellent. So again, we're moving through a programme there. It'll be the same. I won't repeat myself again, but the same levels of governance, checking, testing, retesting, and so on. And again, subject to all those approvals, we're going to come back early next year. I think probably the next bit is just to say that we've seen projects being discontinued. Now, CO1 is a prime example of that. There were some real fundamental changes in the housing and the development market and in the finance arena. We reported back in January this year in a briefing note what happened and why it was decided to curtail at that point any further development as a affordable housing project. And it's just simply become unviable. And there was lots of changes, as you'll recall, around interest rates and such, as well as rapidly rising building costs. We are now at a point as well that the formerly Aveley Library and Hall, which we developed up for 16 units, went through planning for 16 affordable homes, and is now, being considered actively for disposal. So that was a direct consequence of the council's need to generate income. That's a general fund site. Would have been great to have developed it out for affordable housing. The council circumstances determined otherwise. So just really to finish off, I think, is I'll draw your attention further down in terms of the pipeline and the table at 3.30. So these are just a couple of updates really on those projects there that form the bulk, the rest of the programme, and they are typically underused, vacant, housing revenue account land, garage sites. So at Vigorans Way, we've got went through planning on last Thursday and had planning approval for, say, 7 two-bed houses at Vigorans Way. The Lyndhurst Road in Corringham project of 6 houses, planning has been submitted, and we hope that will be in front of the committee in October, planning committee. And Broxburn Drive had a resolution to grant planning also, and that was a planning application for 33 properties and other flats. So that positively received by committee. I'll probably just stop there. And happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. Now, I'm obviously aware that both the member for Blackshots and for Aveley are probably going to want to talk a lot about those specific schemes. So can we start by just focusing on the areas of the pipeline that are being discontinued, and then we'll move on to the future projects? So has anyone got anything they want to ask about the discontinued stuff? Councillor Shinnick. Not Blackshots or Aveley, because we'll get to that.
Right, on 3.30, last week, Vigorans and Broxbourne Drive were granted planning permission. However, they are not in the immediate plans for development. When do you think they will be developed, and can you guarantee that they will not be sold off?
Okay, so I can't sit here and give any guarantees as you'd expect. What we want to do as officers, we absolutely want to develop these sites out. We absolutely know we have the resources, we have the capacity, and as always, it's been the requirement to support the borrowing. We know that the revenue streams for these will support the borrowing, but as I've explained for the other projects, nothing is different in terms of requiring those authorities and changes so that we can borrow on the back of our rental stream and the use of the right to buy receipts. So by getting through planning is a really good progress point. The next steps would be to go to members and seek authority to engage building contractors, but we can't do that at the moment because of the need to develop get through those governance points, if you like, and the requirement to obtain really authority from Treasury to borrow on the back of the rental stream. So the programme's really determined by that, but it's absolutely there within our ambition. So we have resources and so on.
Evelina, you have something to add?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would, Councillor Shinnick. So, just in terms of the decision making, we have got an agreement to take Teviot business case as the test case with the Treasury to see whether a principle can be established that we can indeed borrow money to invest into stock. So this is the most advanced business case, and that will be the real test for us. And if we pass that, we will take all of the other ones on a similar principle. Thank you.
Councillor Shinnick.
Right, 3.31. If the Culver site is sold on the open market, does that sale come with the same guarantee for affordable homes? And will the design that was agreed with the community forum part of the sale conditions? Would it be part of the sale condition?
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So yeah, we worked really hard, didn't we, with the local community to end up with a planning permission that was well received in the end locally. Any sale will be the subject to the purchasers' decisions on what they want to do. They can absolutely implement the planning permission with those levels of affordable housing and the project as it stands, and I very much hope that that's what we would end up with. But they'll have the absolute freedom as owners of the site to completely revisit. It won't be within our control. What I will do is, I will say that we probably need to refer back to my colleague, Mark Bradbury, to see what the conditions of any sale would be, because I don't know what they would be and what they may or may not restrict. We're absolutely obliged to get best consideration as authority. That's a legislative requirement. But your specific point around what conditions may be attached to the sale, I wish I could, but I can't answer for you here. But I can absolutely refer back to my colleagues there, and they'll get you an answer on that.
Yep, Councillor Shinnick.
Thank you, Chair. When your housing team work on plans for sites that will now be sold to pay back council debt, how do you get the money back for their time working on the planning application? It is not fair that residents' rent is used for this when we have no budget for decorating in shelter accommodation? So when the housing land's sold, is the officer's time taken out and paid back to the housing account?
Councillor Spain.
Sorry, I was going to ask a question that relates to Sue's getting into some detail here, and there may be a legal point here that we're discussing something in open session that all councillors received an email this morning from Democratic Services asking us not to discuss it.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
In relation to the properties that are now being sold. We had a fairly robust instruction from Matthew Bolter. I was quite surprised to see some of these properties on the agenda this evening, given the fact that they weren't made public until, sorry, they're still not been made public officially, and councillors were given on the behest of the leader of the council at last night's full council, the list of properties this morning, but were told not to discuss it, not to release it, and not to give out information from it. And I'm trying to be a little bit protective here of officers as well as yourself, Sue, because I'm not sure whether we're allowed to talk about this. I'd welcome some guidance.
That's a very good point. I assumed that they were outside the scope because, I mean, this had been published in public, but Evelina?
Could you repeat the question? Which would be outside the scope? Sorry, I didn't.
As Councillor Spate pointed out, the sites that were referred to last night are sites that could perhaps be sold. They came in an email from Democratic Services this morning. Obviously outlined it was commercially sensitive and therefore shouldn't be discussed. Now, I've not read that email thoroughly. It only came in today. I assumed that these were already public knowledge decisions, because obviously it wasn't published on Pink. So are we okay continuing this conversation?
My understanding is that that is the case, that some of those sites that, for example, Overley Library has been declared surplus to requirements some time ago in a cabinet decision. So I think the ones that we talked to you about, I think, have been in public domain before. That's not the full list, but I obviously can't comment on that. So I'd rather maybe we didn't go down this route if we could, just to protect everyone possible.
If it's helpful, just so, because some members may not have seen it, the message from Matt, there was an original list sent out round about 9 o'clock, which was promised to us last night, and then was followed by an email. So clearly there'd been some discussion within legal or democratic services or whatever, and at 11:40 Matt sent us all a message saying, in relation to the list sent out earlier this morning, please find attached and below a further supporting document from Rob Large. I take this opportunity to remind members that this document is exempt and should not be shared or disclosed to anyone. Now, I don't know where the borders lie, and I don't want to get yourselves into any hot water as much as anybody else, because we're not getting
between advice that comes from legal and obviously this advice, and obviously that's problematic in itself because at least somebody's wrong. So just for the benefit of recording, a question was asked regarding the information published in this paper and a separate email that came through this morning regarding the confidentiality of certain sites. Mr. Andrews has confirmed that this paper, which is already in the public domain, has been in the public domain in different guises in front of different public committees for a while. But Councillor Spate raises a very important point regarding the accuracy of advice from elsewhere. So I will undertake after this meeting to contact the Chief Executive just to make sure we square the circle. And if it was just simple miscommunication, that hopefully that is the answer. But once I get an answer from the Chief Executive, I'll undertake to share it with the committee. Right, sorry, you in the...
Yeah, that's fine. No,
yeah,
I'll leave that then. Yeah, I apologise, I have not seen my emails today.
Well, no, you're commenting on a post that's already published. I don't think you intentionally did anything inappropriate. Just before I bring Councillor Redsu in, that I just wanted to clarify something, Keith, when Councillor Shinnett was talking about disposals. One of the things that strikes me about the paper is that we are talking about ceasing projects for a range of things. 114 notice, current interest rates of circa 5% or an inflationary rate of circa 9%. One of the things that concerns me about a mentality of the disposal of sites is the things that are inhibiting those sites going forward at the moment are all temporary. Most 114 notices expire within 2, 3, 4 years. The interest rates is tenfold what it was a couple of years ago. That won't be a permanent feature of life. The inflationary rate is fourfold what it was 9 months ago. That's not going to be a permanent feature of life. So should we be saying for all projects that are cancelled, the next step should logically just be disposal, or shouldn't there be a twin track approach where some projects are just deemed unviable at the current time and therefore need to be put on the back burner but not necessarily abandoned?
Thank you, Chair. So I think what your question relates to the council's strategy in terms of generating income as a consequence of the Section 114. And as your humble housing development manager, I don't think genuinely, and I'm not trying to avoid the question, but I don't think that's something that's within my remit to be able to answer, even if I have personal opinions on that matter. So I can't really answer you. I think it's a genuinely sensible question, and I think the best that I can offer is that we take that question and we take it to our finance colleagues for them to and our property colleagues to produce a response about how the council's approach to generating income through property disposals has come about and whether it remains the right answer. I can't offer more than that.
No, thank you. Perhaps if Evelina could take that away with finance colleagues. Don't get me wrong, I'm not opposed to disposal of assets as a matter of principle. The council owns far too much and it's sat on the books at the taxpayer's expense. I don't mind disposing of things that are not useful. And certainly banking has changed. Banks do not want to lend, particularly to build things like tower blocks, because if you start building a housing estate, you can stop after 50 houses if the capital dries up. You can't stop a tower block halfway through. I understand that, and that's obviously why things like CO1 have become so complicated. But I just wanted to make sure that we just weren't blunderbussing one blanket approach across all of the prospective projects we had, and perhaps there are some projects that genuinely have merit in terms of delivering social housing for the learning disabled and other types of vulnerable groups, that perhaps we just want to say, well, we need that provision for certain vulnerable people, so we just need to frankly weather an interest rate, a 114 and an inflationary storm and return to some of those projects at a more appropriate date. So perhaps, Evelina, could you come back to us when that's possible?
I will take it to my colleagues because it's not even a question that would be really for me to answer or comment on. But
I don't need
I
for
will
you to
take
comment
that
on,
to my colleagues. Thank you.
Yeah, just so we can understand the rationale for why we're taking one approach. Councillor Spate.
Yeah, and I think on a similar but different line, we had that really informative briefing yesterday where we learned about all the great things that Basildon are doing in terms of their contracting and various other things. What Basildon are not so keen to talk about is the new homes development and Swan Housing and whatever, which has been a monumental disaster of well, that's just been a monumental disaster. So there are lessons to be learned there as well, so we can get positives and whatever. But again, it's sort of allies to what you've said about our strategy going forward. Our choice of partner is going to be absolutely fundamental, that we get the right people to work with or we sell to the right people as well.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask two questions, but I won't now. It's about Teviot Flats. I went to the consultation in August, and there was quite a good reception there. Bruce was there. Hello. Can you tell me the update of that, please? Of that consultation, please.
I can probably just give you a summary, and Bruce will let me know if I've gone astray.
Okay.
So the update from that was generally it was very well received. In terms of, a positive response to the designs. There were, as always, there will be anxieties and concerns around the open space that's available, given that that particular proposal seeks to redevelop on a fair amount of open space, but not particularly good and well-used open space. And the other area, of course, which we'll find in every development, is concerns around car parking. So I think, if I'm looking to Bruce to see, he's nodding for me, thank you. I think they were the key areas of concern that remain, but broadly speaking, across the piece, they were well received by local residents. We have a consultant report that we can make available to you, Councillor, that will just summarise the outcome of that consultation. Sure.
Councillor Redsell, do you want to dive into black shots?
No, I wasn't going to actually, James. What's it? No, I wasn't really going to mention black shots, but as you said it, I will now. But Keith knows that if I've got anything, I will ask anyway, so it doesn't matter. And I think we're moving quite well, to be honest. We've got a little couple of hiccups, but we've already mentioned that to Peter, and I'm sure he's fed it back to you. But I just really... the four homes that are in Chadwell, are they actually going to Chadwell people on the list? Because I know the 53 that went, I was told they went to Chadwell residents who already live in the area. So I don't know how true that is, and if this 4 in Lowen Road are going to go, or is it people on the list?
Thank you, Councillor. So Chadwell was let, there was a 75%, so 3 of the 4 went under a local lettings policy, and the remaining 1 was allocated under the bidding system.
It wasn't that bad, was it, James? No.
I didn't say it was bad. I suggested it might be lengthy.
No, I've been very good lately, haven't I?
Any other comments on this paper? I've just got one very brief one, Keith. Obviously, Terrier and Blackshots are very significant schemes. They're very large schemes. Dispensation from the Treasury is financially the only viable route. What is the resource that's being put into building, not just the business case for logistically what you want to do with the blocks, but what's the resource being put into building the case to actually get the dispensation?
Thank you, Chair. So we're working with consultancies that we've engaged for the project, but they are engaged specifically to develop a business case for Cabinet. So in addition to that, we're working very closely with the Council's senior financial people to validate, to review and ensure that the case is absolutely robust. So there are resources from the engaged consultancy team. As I say, that was their prime objective and obligation in terms of that consultancy engagement, but we're supplementing it in terms of working, as you would expect, very closely with Stephen Mayer and his colleagues. They will be required to give really the final seal of approval before we can take that to Treasury. So there is quite a lot of resource going into it.
Yeah, I'll just say that those things do require, very specialist lobbying. Yeah, I remember several years ago I asked on a corporate overview and scrutiny committee meeting what resource were we putting into devolution conversations, and the answer was very little. Essex County put in quite a bit, and as a result they built a model that would have been advantageous for them when we didn't, and when the government launched their white paper, we didn't really have a counter model that we wanted. That was the position we were in, late 2020, I think it was. So I would just say that we do need to make sure that logistically we get it right for Blackshots and Teviot, because it's important for both those communities, but we also get it right in terms of building the capacity we need to win that argument with His Majesty's government, because those are two very separate exercises.
Agreed, and resources are very important for us, yeah.
That's Redsell.
As you've opened it up, James, to Blackshots, I think with what we're you know, with the residents, we're talking to the residents. I think we've got to be a bit better with residents by telling them that it's just a proposed design to give you something to take to cabinet to say whether it's viable or not. I think the little things we're getting back are there is enough parking on the roads, and when asked the consultees, have you visited that area? No. And I think we can't get anything else on the pavements at the moment because that's all we're getting. So I think we've got to be a bit more honest with the residents, and this is just a proposed design. It may not be 240. It won't have as much worry with that because there's enough land round that. But the Bevan and Morrison, we may have to produce bits of land which we've already given to try and get that sort of working in that area. But I think I want us to be more open with the residents because I think they go into these consultations and they're not really taking away. Well, they're taken away with what we want them to see and not what may be, you know. So I think we've got to be a bit more honest in that way and just telling them how it is.
Thank you, Councillor. So I think, you know, the point about people's perception of what they see when they go to a consultation event, very often, you know, I'm no doubt been guilty of it myself, that you would see, okay, these are the drawings, this is what's going to happen then, and we do try very hard. So I would be absolutely clear that, you know, we are being open and transparent throughout of the process. We are being honest in what we're saying to people, but if what I'm hearing is that people are perhaps seeing more certainty in the proposals than perhaps there actually is, then we need to reinforce that these are the proposals at that point in time. And so I'll take that message on board and I'll take it back to the team. Thank you.
I mean, as councillors, we go there anyway, so we will tell them how it is. But I think that's all they need. They need an honest approach to say this is what it might be, but if we can't fulfil it, you know, it may not be as much, you know. So I think they're just seeing that and getting a bit worried that that's what they're going to have to deal with. And it's not always the tenants that are coming out the flats; it's the people that already live in that area. You know, admittedly, it's going to be a better design, hopefully, than the high rise. But I think they just need, as you said, Keith, it's got to be that bit of an honest approach when we're there, you know, and people to ask. So I think the consultees there are just there to actually sell what they're trying to do. But I think we need to be a bit more on top of that. But thanks, Keith. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Dowd, final comment, make it
Thanks, Chair.
entertaining.
Do the tenants realise that they may be going from sort of social rents to affordable rents? Has that been discussed with them?
Thanks, Chair. So those residents tenants that are moving out of the blocks will be going into the relet properties, which are at the social rent level elsewhere in the borough. So they, you know, there are. There's lots of resources being put into those conversations with the existing residents to make sure they are fully informed. You know, that is clear that, you know, that's the rent levels of the properties that they'll be moving out of the blocks and into elsewhere.
Right then, everyone happy to note recommendations 1.1 and 1.2?
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, agenda item 7, the recommendation log. Obviously, the task and finish groups and working groups have already been set up and are well underway, so we can tick that quite happily. And we just need to add to the recommendation log that Evelina's going to go and get more clarity from wider colleagues regarding the pools of certain projects and whether or not certain projects should be simply put on ice rather than abandoned. And obviously, we need to write to the Chief Executive's office quite rapidly regarding the legal advice on site disposals. Councillor Redsill? We're not at the work plan yet.
Oh, you're
the
not. Okay,
recommendation log.
sorry, shut up for a minute.
Is anything else outstanding for the recommendation log that I'm aware of? Thank you. Item 8, work plan. Councillor Redsell.
Don't worry, I'll sort him out later. I thought there was going to be. I know garages have been put on the briefing note, but there's nothing. We seem to have come to a bit of a standstill, Evelina, on the painting of the garages. I know some of them can't be painted because they may come into that strategy of taking them down. But can we sort of earlier have a bit more updated before it gets to, you know, I don't see anything that's coming up in November or January.
Evelina.
Come on, Evelyn, it's another one of my pet projects.
I will probably commit to producing another briefing note from. Would you like it for overall garages or just for your ward? Okay, that's fine. So we'll get an update to the briefing note.
Just looking at the November meeting, the November meeting is looking pretty massive. I wonder whether or not we wanted to bounce a couple of those items into March, because March all we have is the homelessness strategy and Councillor Johnson. Obviously, Blackshots, Lyndhurst, Teviot, given the stage that they're in, we're going to want to take those sooner rather than later. Evelina.
There will be more items coming onto the January one, with your permission, Chair. We would like to give you an update on the stock condition survey. You might recall we had a interim report, and we would like to give you a final one. Mm-hmm. I believe there is also a report coming about the extension of the HMO licensing scheme to January. So it might seem light at the moment, but I think as we go along it will fill up.
Okay. Well, I don't know how other people feel, but I'm wondering whether or not we need to programme in a February meeting, because thus far, November, all of those need to be given due consideration. I mean, fees and charges is usually a solid hour because of the direct impact on constituents. So I'm not particularly seeing anything that warrants being removed from the work plan. So I think we may need to schedule a February meeting.
It's a good idea. A Christmas meeting.
February may give officers a little bit more time. So, I mean, stock condition HMO can indeed come to March, and then we may want to take out maybe right to buy, regulation of social housing, and maybe even the. I mean, would it make sense for the? So would it make the homelessness update with a focus on mental health and social care? Would it make sense to put that into the March meeting to come at the same time that Ryan brings us the homelessness prevention strategy?
Is it this committee that's the bottleneck, or the officers' time?
Well, I think that there's just a huge amount of items coming forward that weren't necessarily ready for our earlier meeting in June, but are getting to a fruition point. Evelina?
There will be probably the Lyndhurst Road report. Keith tells me is not going to the November one. That's unlikely to be ready. The HMO needs to come to the January for it's then en route to cabinet for later. We could do Blackshots update just by way of a report without necessarily asking questions, because that's not going to be yet the business case, isn't it? No. And then if we are going to get to a business case, we would be probably asking for an additional one of those as well, to just beyond that.
Well, okay. I mean, it's a little bit complicated then. So should we say, in principle, we'll agree to an additional meeting in February, but we'll allow officers to go away and rewrite the programme and slot things in as and when they make
Yeah.
logistical sense in terms of the paper.
Thank you.
Yep.
Say about getting names right on Health Watch.
What's wrong? Oh, Kim Kames. Yeah, that's probably not right.
I think she'd be quite offended if we get her name wrong.
No, it's right on the name flag. All right, so we'll agree to a February meeting and we'll have a conversation offline about programming. Wonderful. Everyone, it's 28 minutes past 8. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Have you?